Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Machiavelli's Discourses. Today we're continuing Book 1, and we're looking at Chapter 21 of Book 1. Today's topic is how much blame that a prince and that of a republic merit that they lack their own arms. So this is the question of whether how much they are able to defend themselves, or they have their own virtue. They lack their own arms. So this is a short paragraph, chapter, 3 paragraphs. So let's go through it. For chapter 1, the present princes in modern republics that lack their own soldiers for defense and defense and offense ought to be ashamed of themselves, and to think, as in the example of Tullus, that such a defect is not through a lack of men apt for military, but through their own fault, that they have not known how to make their men military. So therefore, it's not the question of that they don't have enough men, but they don't know how to make their men military. In other words, if they don't have armed, in other words, they don't have, it's not that they lack men for military, but they don't know how to, it's their own fault. They don't know how to make their men tough so that they can defend themselves. For when he succeeded to that kingdom, Tullus did not find a man who had ever been in war, since Rome had been in peace for 40 years. Nonetheless, when he planned to make war, he did not think to avail himself either of the Samnites or the Tuscans, or others who were accustomed of being in arms. In other words, Tullus had an example. Tullus wanted to go to war, but Sulla has, Numa in his reign, 40-year reign, was peaceful. And that they have not been to war for 40 years. So instead of he did not think of availing himself of other people to fight for him, either the Samnites or the Tuscans, who had long husband. But as a very prudent man, he decided to avail himself of his own, so chose his own. So much was his virtue that in a stroke, under his government, he was able to make very excellent soldiers. In other words, you can make your soldiers excellent if you make them hard. You toughen them up. You make them possible. So he was under his virtue, not to rely on others, but to use his own, and in other words, so much of his virtue in one stroke, under his government, he was able to make very excellent soldiers. It is more true than any other truth that where there are men, there are no soldiers. In other words, where there are men, there are no soldiers. It arises through a deficit of the prince, and not through any other defect, either of the sight or of nature. In other words, if they're men, but they don't have soldiers, they don't have soldiers, they have men, people, but no soldiers. There's no defect but the prince or the ruler. Of this, there is a very fresh example. For everyone knows that in the most recent times the King of England assaulted the Kingdom of France, nor did he take soldiers other than those of his people. And because that kingdom had gone more than 30 years without making war, he had neither soldiers nor captains who had ever served in the military. Right? This is Henry. In other words, Henry VIII invaded France on June 1513 and defeated the French at the Battle of Spurs in 16 August. England had, however, fought to defend the independence of the Duchy of Brittany in 1492, less than 30 years earlier. In other words, so therefore, again, the English. He speaks of Henry VIII. again, this is the idea that the English have the example. They don't. In other words, had the kingdom had gone more than 30 years without making war. Neither soldiers nor captains who had ever served in military served in war. Nevertheless, he did not hesitate to assault these kingdoms full of captains and good armies that had been continually under arms. In other words, full of captains and good armies that had been continually under arms in the wars of Italy. In other words, the French kings had good captains, good armies, because they had been under arms in Italy, war Italy. It arose from. It all arose that the king, being a prudent man, and his kingdom well ordered, which did not interrupt the orders of war in times of peace. In other words, that the English still maintained their orders. In other words, that ironically, that these kings, the French kings, had lots of experience. The English kings did not. They did not do this, but they maintained their orders, he's saying. They maintained the orders of war in times of peace, right? And the English, this is the problem with the English example. The English example is different. Machiavelli is silent about the English, except for this one little hint. The English example, remember, the English used to kick butt in France, dominated France in the Middle Ages a lot. The English, in particular the Plantagenet rulers, were the most powerful faction in England and over France, had the most provinces, owned nearly half of France. They lost it from internal squabbling, a weakness of their leaders. Here I would recommend reading Shakespeare's history plays, particularly the Henry VI plays, to understand how England lost their kingdom of control over France. Whereas their capture of France, in many ways, not only Henry V, but also from Edward III and onwards. In other words, this idea that Edward III almost conquered the Black Prince, conquered huge swaths of France. Henry really took over the kingdom of France. Henry V, became king of, he did not become king of France himself, but he insisted that his son, who would become king of France, but does so as a child, and thus through the long the long protectorate or regency, that joint monarchy was lost. The English example is a very powerful one. And the English example was what? Of the citizen being armed. The English orders were that the citizens that the good orders was that the prince, the king, and who ordered regional leaders, dukes and earls, to maintain their men-at-arms, but also did what? They also insisted that the yeomen and the free people learn how to be archers, the longbow. So you had the heavy armor, yes, the heavy armored knights, maintained and controlled by the dukes and the earls, but you had also had the free cities and the cities and the town folk training as militia through longbow practice and longbow. And as long as the longbow reigned, the English dominated and the French did not have longbow, because why? The French did not trust their citizens, the subjects, the peasants, the earls. Only the heavily manned arms, and rather they would rely on crossbows, not longbows. The crossbow was more. It took long. It was interesting. It was powerful, but not as powerful as the longbow. But the longbow required training and skill. So therefore, this requires virtue in that sense. The English maintained good orders and virtue, and thus, even though that during times of peace. So there's an esoteric argument here in the second paragraph of 21 that makes the case of this, right? That what is it? That all this arose because the king's being prudent man and kingdom well ordered, which did not interrupt the orders of war in times of peace. Now he goes to the Theban, paragraph 3. After the Theban Pelodices and Epidamus had freed the Thebes and had brought it out of the servitude of the Spartan Empire. Though they found themselves in a city used to serving and in the midst of effeminate people, they did not hesitate so much was their virtue to put them under arms and to go with them to meet the Spartan armies in the fields and conquer them. He who writes of it, this is again Plutarch's Pelopaides, right? Says that in a short time, these two showed that men of war are born not only in Lacedaemon, Sparta, but in every other place where men are born, provided that they may be found one who knows how to direct them to the military. As one sees that Tullus knew how to direct Romans, the Tullus is third king, right? Virgil could not have expressed this opinion better, nor shown with other words that he took its side when he said, "And Tullus will move indolent men to arms," right? The Latin quote is from Aeneid, book 6, lines 1813, 1814. Machiavelli substitutes decides for Virgil's resides, decides versus resides, without changing the meaning. There's a change here. The words move insolent men to arms. So we end here. This is where this chapter ends. The example of here is the example. He moves from in ancient. In other words, first he deals with Tullus example, right? Then he goes to the modern example of England, and then he goes to the Theban example. Okay. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below, and I will get them when I see them. I'll respond. If you like the chapter, hit the like button, because the more you like things, the better the algorithm gets. Share it. Share the video far and wide. Share it on social media. Share it with your friends. Again, commenting, liking, and sharing helps the algorithm and brings it to attention. I'm more likely to if someone's searching for something to get found. Another thing, if you didn't like it, you could of course thumbs down it, but say why in the comments, and this way people benefit from it. Can understand why you didn't like it, and maybe I was wrong, and maybe I missed something, and you want to highlight something. Another thing is that if you want to follow me on social media, the social media links are below. Next is if you wish to know more about me as a researcher and a scholar, you can check out the academic social media links. You want to check out my research and scholarship as well. Those places are where they are to be found and located. So go check it beneath the social media links. And then last, if you want to contribute, help what I do here, you want to contribute or assist, you can do so through Patreon or Subscribestar, and you can, you can buy, if you have not already bought one, you can buy one of my books that are listed. The currently available books are listed below, and you can, how can I say? You can order it through either the publisher. Okay, that's the extreme way. You can your local bookstore if they have it, or maybe or have them order it for you if you want to help assist local bookstores. You can order through the publisher directly, or you can order through an online distributor like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Libris, Book Depository, or so forth and so on. Well, that's it. We will look at next time, chapter 22. So have a good day. Bye-bye.